so I can see if I can be live on my Wi-Fi without the thing plugged in. I put something in the description because I want to also mention that we have some brothers that were actually assisting and take care of. If you remember, we had did to some a while back with some orphans, and the reason why it's important is I wanted to mention that we are caring for them. And I wanted to mention that, you got to always remember in this world that there's always going to be people in distress or in need. And if you ever get yourself in a position where you're at an advantage or you have something that you can do make different, definitely do that. Make a difference. Amen, amen. So these are the children that we have baptized. If you remember, there's a couple of them in the description. You can see this is how many there were. Pretty much you can see we got them all by name and their age and everything. It's like 30. That was 30 of them white recently, and we got 34 of them now. But it's more making sure that they're taken care of. So if you feel like you make a difference in their life, we got something in the script that you can give. No pressure. It's all if you want to. But I'm going to read something real fast for the live today. I'm going to bring us some real quick archaeological evidence of how we know the biblical narrative is true history. I'm just going to do a random fact today. There's going to be some history about the last king of Israel. I'm talking northern Israel. So I'm going to use a timeline to kind of give an understanding of that and kind of point this out. So it's an interesting artifact. It's a very interesting artifact. So Hosea was the final ruler of the northern kingdom of Israel, reigning from circa 732 to 723 BC until the fall of Samaria, right? So that's what the capital of Israel is called, right? We've seen that the northern tribe, they would be called, you also hear the word Samaria, right? That's just northern Israel, right? When Judah and Israel split. The biblical record of Hosea's reign is as follows. So we know about the scriptures, right? Where the scriptures talk about it is going to be 2 Kings 17, 1 to 6. Just talks about in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, because remember the kings were one was reigning in Judah, one was reigning in the lands of Israel separately. Then Hosea, the king or the son of Eliah, began to reign in Samaria over Israel, and he reigned 9 years, right? And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, this is important. I'm going to use this for example. As you can see here, we can see some kings would do good, some kings would do evil. That'd be something that would happen over time, right? That's just something that would happen. We can see on this side, this would be the kings of Judah, and this would be the kings of the northern tribes. You can see capital Samaria. This one will be Jerusalem, and this would be right after this would be right after Solomon reigned, and then it split. So if we go down, 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 the king of Judah, we can see Hosea. He would be the last king. He was a bad king. Almost every king, as soon as you hear a king of the northern tribes of Israel, for some reason they were all evil. Some started out okay, but then they ended off evil. But there was always usually at different times different prophets at this time. But at this time, while these were existing, Isaiah was prophesying. So Hosea, he was going for a long time and everything, but he was the last king of Israel, the last king of the northern tribe of Israel. It says, yet not as the kings of Israel who were before him. So it's basically he's saying, but not as much as the kings before him. Against him came, now notice what king of Assyria is going to come up. Shalmaneser. So Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, right? Very historical individual who's going to go against Hosea. So Hosea became his vessel and paid him tribute, but the king of Assyria found treachery in Hosea, for he had sent messengers to So. So So was a king of Egypt, and offered no tribute to the king of Assyria. So he ended up basically making a treaty with basically Egypt, which is kind of interesting. Let me actually put this. Let me actually put a map down because That's when Assyria was working its way down into the lands of Egypt. Um, just to kind of put the time frame, what it would kind of look like. Um, this one, yeah, yeah. Let me just kind of point it out. So pretty much, this one okay, but let me go to one that's more to the time we want. Kind of make it a little clear. Okay. All right. So this is more what we want to do. So you can get a good idea at the time scale. It kind of got a kind of a jump. So they don't really got 700 here. They got 800 and 600. And it kind of goes from here, like the Assyria rules over here, and then they kind of make their way down and they take this area, and then they kind of make a vessel out of these ones, but they're basically gonna be limited. Let me see if there's a more accurate map. There's some better ones somewhere. This one. Okay, this one's good. This one's fine. All right, so this one might be a little better. Yeah, this one's a little better than this one. Yeah, that one, the other one just got doesn't talk about the Amor these ones and whatnot, and the Elamites and whatnot. It looks like, but this is this one will work with this one. This is fine. So pretty much this what it would look like is that when the kings right before you get the rises of some of the later ones and whatnot, you're gonna have a few of the kings of Assyria that's gonna take the areas of Sumeria. So you see Sumeria, they be ruling over this area of Sumeria, and they would made a vessel out of that one. The reason why that's important is because right after this last king comes these later kings that's going to be basically fight with Jerusalem. You can see some of the very very dramatic things that had happened in certain areas like Jerusalem and Lachish, the lands of Lachish, and you can see right here Sumeria. Now you got that background of that understanding. Let's get back to the little history of the story. So it's going to be Shalmaneser. So he's going to be a little earlier. There's also to kind of put that right here. Kind of point out. Right, Shalmaneser, right? You can see he would be a long time ago and everything, right? That's going to be very important. There's going to be something that we're going to kind of get a good understanding of. I'll just click this to kind of point out, right? This just talks about a couple of different kings that's going to come in a little later. We don't need this. I'm just going to close it. We don't need this. Just talk about one of the kings. So very, very important. It's going to later time how that land's going to look when it's all taken. All right. So let's just continue on to what's going on here. So Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hosea became his vassal, and we already talked about that and everything. Then we seen that the lands of Egypt, right? These basically had made allegiance real fast with these ones, but then the one in Assyria said no, that's not happening. Right? He said that's not going to happen, and he attacked them pretty much. Right, it's over here. All right, so we're talking about king, last king of Israel, last king of Israel. Okay. So we see we're talking about all those things. This is scripture. We're just talking about all those things, right? The king of Assyria invaded all the land and came to Samaria. That's why we're looking at the map like that. So he invaded all the land and he went all the way down to Samaria, this little area here. So this was his vessel area. That was the vessel area. And then all of a sudden that became part of the area of his taken area. Right? That's very important. That's gonna be what we're gonna note with the map. And for 3 years he besieged it. And in the ninth year of Hosea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried the Israelites away to Assyria, and placed them in Halah on the harbor, in the river of Gozan, and in the city of the Medes. Right? That's very, very important. We know that this group actually gets later moved because we know the Sumerians pop up in the lands of Egypt later on in history, especially during the time of the first century with Messiah and stuff. Even during the time of the Maccabean revolt, we know that they was down there on the other side of Euphrates, down under Egypt, pretty much. But notice that they was moved. It was relocated at first. Okay, so watch this little seal. So the seal of Jose's servant, Abidi. Abidi. I probably said that way. I'm supposed to say that right. Uh, Abdi. In ancient seal, right, bearing the Paleo Hebrew, right? It's gonna have some very old Hebrew on it, right? Inscription belonging to Abdi, servant of Jose, right? So very important. They just talk about it was purchased. It was a very important seal and everything, and they know that it was basically, as it says, seal. It is what it says, Abdi, servant of Jose. That's what that would say, right? Very, very interesting to let us know who was there and everything. So let us know about the ancient seal and everything, giving us a little understanding of what's going on there. Just gonna jump down a little bit, right? Just giving us a little understanding. How old is that with that ancient writing? As it says, only one Hebrew king was named Jose, the final ruler of the northern kingdom of Israel. However, it just talks about something. He notes the Paleo Hebrew writing on this seal fits very well with other dated inscriptions from the last third of the 8th century BC. So that means that by the time of the 8th century BC, this type of seal was in practice. So it would end right at the 7th century BC. So that means this type of seal, we know that was being used in the 8th century BC. So it's right on time, right on time. Even though the seal was purchased on just Tesla market and everything, but it says if it is um, indeed real, right? Extra biblical evidence is extra biblical evidence for the historicity of King Jose, right? That's really interesting. That's really interesting. But there's also a little more. There's a little more that we find. So there's another king, right? After, right, you're gonna have different kings. Then we talk about there's another king. Let me actually point that out. Um, go back forward because that was a good, decent map, and I don't know if there's anyone that's close to that. But remember, in this lands of Assyria, there's going to be other kings. There's going to be here, mentioned by name, basically Tiglath-Pileser, right? That's over here. So here's Jose, King Jose is also arrested in the royal inscription of the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III. So his him being arrested by an Assyrian. It's kind of interesting. So it just talks about a couple things. When it talk about what's going to happen real fast, I'm just going to jump to it. This is what it says. So land of Bit Mariah, basically literally Omri land. That is Israel, right? So it's talking about basically Israel. All of his people too, Assyria, I carried off. So basically saying basically the land of Omri. Remember, Omri named the land Samaria off of basically uh, pretty much a interesting naming of the land. But Omri was the one that basically named the land Samaria. Long story short, so he's saying basically the land of Omri, which is Israel, all of his people to Assyria I carried off. Right? It says Pekah, their king, I have killed, and Hosea as king I have appointed them. So he's saying that he killed one of the kings. Now he's talking about what he's talking about is when he actually sets him on the throne. So he's saying that he set the king of Israel on the throne, Hosea. I appointed over them. So he appointed him over the throne. That's interesting. This affirms the biblical description of Hosea usurping the throne when Tiglath-Pileser III attacked Israel. As we know it already. We read that in 2 Kings 15 and 29 and 30. It says, "In the days of Pekah, king of Israel." All right, let's go back to the list. Let's go back to the list. Let's go back to the list. Right there it is, Pekah. Remember, he was reigning for a while, and then Jose came afterwards. So we see that that makes perfect sense. Now we got the historical documents to talk about these things, right? We see that Pekah was slayed. Is after him was set up Jose. So very, 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 very deep stuff. So watch right here. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Pelezer, king of Assyria, came and captured Ijon, Abel, Beth, Makkah, Joaiah, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali. He carried the people captive to Assyria, right? He said, even in Naphtali, he says, he took them to Assyria. Then Hosea, the son of Elah, made a conspiracy against Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and struck him down and put him to death and reigned in his place. So that's important. That's important. What does that mean? Who did he slay? Who was Pekah of Remaliah? Who is this person? All right, let me show you. Syrian. This is kind of interesting because this means he's trying to kind of make his way up to the land and whatnot. So that's kind of important. So he's gonna be settled in certain places. So we're gonna talk about these things. So of Ramalia, right? So important. He's gonna be settled in certain places. We'll talk about some of the places he go and how the connections with Assyria stuff. And struck him down and put him to death and reigned in his place in the 12th year of Jotham, the son of Uzziah. It says the Assyrian text illuminates the biblical text by indicating Hosea had sworn allegiance to Assyria in exchange for help securing the throne. So it's saying if you now this was interesting about this. The Assyrians and Israel was constantly going at it until Assyria came. And what's interesting is what's very interesting about this is that a lot of, at this time there was a crazy switch of the thrones very quickly, and they were basically fighting for the thrones. And a lot of them was just governors. A lot of them was actually governors that was trying to rise up. It wasn't even sons of them anymore. Wasn't being sons. There was just different tribes that was taking over. That different ones wanted to rule. It was getting crazy, pretty much. Long story short, it says it just talks inscription. It talks about he took down. Remember, he took down Pekah. We know that we see that right written in the text that Darian also took down Pekah and he set up the other king. Right. So we can see right here that the Assyrian text illuminates the biblical text by indicating Hosea has sworn allegiance to the Assyrians in exchange for help securing the throne. Hosea is also mentioned in summary statement number 9, where Tiglath-Pileser again takes credit for appointing the king, the Israelite king, on the throne as vassal. It appears that Hosea remained a faithful Assyrian vessel throughout Tiglath-Pileser's reign. So we see that throughout Tiglath-Pileser's reign, he was on his side. But then another king of Assyria got on the throne, right? Here we go. Shalmaneser, right? Shalmaneser, we just kind of talked about a little earlier. We talk about a couple of different things, and we talk about Shalmaneser. We got a quick summary of the story. Now we gotta note that the first one was Tiglath-Pileser. Now comes Shalmaneser. Remember the story that we was reading real fast of Second Kings 1-6. Remember what it say? It said against the last king Hosea, Shalmaneser came up. Let's see what Shalmaneser say. So Tiglath-Pileser said that he took basically the previous king Pekah off the throne and set up Hosea. And then Shalmaneser ends up becoming a ruler in Assyria. And let's see what's going on. According to the biblical text, Hosea basically initially paid tribute to the new king Assyria, Shalmaneser the fifth. Right, we see that mentioned. Soon, however, he revolted and turned to So, the king of Egypt. So, the king of Egypt. Click this so you can see. We got his documents for So. So is the king of Egypt. Right? We know that that's a real king. Right? We know that that's a real thing when we think of the land of Egypt. Let's get back to here. So he had went to So, possibly Pharaoh Khan the fourth, for support. So Hosea actions brought swift, obviously, punishment as Shalmaneser marched to Israel, laid siege there for 3 years, and eventually taken the Israelites king as prisoner, deporting the Israelites to Assyria. So see what's going on there. Thus, the biblical record attributes the fall of Samaria to Shalmaneser the fifth. So that's important. That's telling us that it fell again by the Assyrians, but pinpoint Shalmaneser the fifth. This is supported by the Babylonian Chronicles. Now, I spoke about this before, about the Babylonian Chronicles, but here it goes on, which records on the 20th, on the 25th of the month of Tabatu, Shalmaneser in Assyria and Akkad, right? That's Samaria, around in the middle of Samaria, Akkad, right? Where the Akkadians ruled at. Akkad ascended the throne. He revenged Samaria. He revenged Samaria. He revenged Samaria, he said. And just talks a little bit, a couple things, right? About Shalmaneser's reign. I'm just going to jump a little down about some things. It does seem just going to jump down, just talk about some time frames, right? Still giving us those exact time frames and everything. Just going to jump down when it talks about some things. These 3 years may have considered coincided with the 3 years the Bible records Shalmaneser was laying siege to, right? So it's letting us know. Obviously, it gives us those years which will happen, right? It does seem to indicate basically this time was 3 years, just like the biblical narrative says. It's basically saying the historical documents say that it took 3 years as well, like the biblical narrative says it took 3 years. And it says, and then they say basically, and numerous scholars have proposed that Samaria is the missing location. So that's important to know when they talk about when he's laying siege to these things. They know that it's connecting with the biblical narrative. Shalmaneser reigned for only 5 years before he died, and Sargon II ascended the throne. Right, you see what's going on there. So these are written stones that's talking about these biblical characters that existed. Now, what do you think? Now we got another king, Sargon II. Now, what do you think Sargon II is going to say about some of these things? Because actually, what's interesting is, remember, Shalmaneser actually took him off the throne in the 9th year, right? That's important. Why is that important? Because Hosea reigns for 20 years, but he was taken off the throne in the 9th year. But something else happens afterwards. Something happens that's kind of interesting on his time, right? Because going back up here, we can see that how long was Hosea's reign? He said he reigned 9 years. So he reigned 9 years, right? So he reigned 9 years, but that's something interesting that we're going to take note of. So remember, you can see right here, Hosea, 20 years. So let's take a look. Why is some of these things being said? So one more king, Sargon, Hosea and Sargon II. Sargon II. We're going to see something kind of interesting with this one. So a relief of Sargon on the right. So Sargon, most likely here with the little crown on his head. So Sargon on the right. So a relief of Sargon on the right. And pretty much you can see that there's going to be pretty much a couple of people there. It's going to be in the land of Syria and Iraq, pretty much. But let's talk about what's going to happen here. What's going on here? The circumstances surrounding Sargon's ascension are somewhat obscure. It appears that he had absurd who led a coup. Just pretty much he seized the throne. In his inscriptions, he repeatedly claimed that he had conquered Israel. So he's going to actually talk about that he also conquered Israel. In the great summary displayed inscription, so you can see it's one of these little inscriptions and everything. Sargon and boasts. That's what he boasts. So Sargon boasts, I besieged and conquered Samaria. There's Samaria again. So we're seeing that he besieged and conquered Samaria. I took a booty of, he says, about 290 people. That's a lot of people who lived there. So that's a lot of Israelites that was being taken out. I set my governor over and imposed over them the same tribute as the king Shalmaneser V. So you see what's going on there? So you can see that he said that also Shalmaneser was there as well. So he just verified also the previous thing that was spoken about. Similarly, on the cuneiform cylinder from Nimrud, Kala, Sargon declares that he deported Israelites to Syria and resettled Samaria more densely than before. So he's saying that now he took more groups. As you can see right here, this is going to be that little stone that they're talking about. This has little cuneiform writings on it where you can see it's got some. It's like probably a Akkadian script and everything. Go back over here. It says the so-called Nimrud prism from Kala contains Sargon's boast, because that's what Assyria loved to do, is boast, that he deported the Israelites and resettled Samaria with people from other lands he conquered. So you can go right here. It says Sargon declared he deported Israelites to Assyria and resettled Samaria more densely than before and brought there people from the land of my conquest, he said. Now the reason why I'm reading this, right? The reason why I'm reading this, because I want you to understand that this nation fell. This nation fell before. It's no doubt that this nation fell. Throughout history, there is no nation that ever fell that returns back to its same name, or back to its same culture, its same religion, its same order. But this nation, this is the only nation. Israel is the only nation that came back not as a neo nation. Assyria fell many times and it became Neo Assyria. In fact, this Assyria that's attacking them is Neo Assyria. This is not the original Assyria. You'll have neo nations, new nations. Neo means new. So you have new nations with new cultures and new practices, new people and new styles. But this nation that was destroyed, and we know in history was destroyed, we know by the time of Cyrus, they're going to be told to come back to their land. They build it exactly to the same way. We know because later on, when we get the Gospels, they're mentioning that they're doing the same things. They have the same ways, the same laws, the same structure, the same statutes, the same everything the same, right? That's unheard of in any other culture. And remember, this is Assyria that's destroying them. And if you know, Assyria does fear tactics, and they have all types of things that they do that they basically bring down the nation. And also, they're being deported. I appointed my eunuch over them, or my eunuch over them, as governor, and counted them as Assyrians. Now, this is important. This is important, so you can see how people are being moved and being reculturalized. So that's important. And remember, also they get a different script. We know because during the time of Ezra, they actually start to pick up that Aramaean style script. That's what you're going to start seeing. Some scholars have pointed out that Sargon's claim to capture Samaria all come from the late of his reign, year 15 and 16, right? So they say it's something that scholars know. It's something that's true. And so one says this, Edwin noted, if it was indeed a fact that Sargon had captured the city of Samaria at the beginning of his reign, then the question may well be asked why it took him so long to remember that fact. Others had pointed out that Sargon was busy in Assyria making his claim to the throne secure in the first year, make his throne secure in the first year of his reign, and could not have been campaigning in Israel. So some try to say, oh, no, it couldn't be. But we're getting all these things all aligned that's happening with these things. So who actually conquered Samaria? So who conquered Samaria? Who actually conquered Samaria? Maybe they all did. Maybe they all took a portion of attacking the lands of Samaria. Maybe they all took a portion. Maybe it was a process. That's what it looks like to me. If you was to ask me historically, it looks like, just like what the biblical narrative says, that was a constant, as we see, transfer of kings over that land. So it could have been constantly transferring kings. But this one, as we see, for a while he was living, right? We had a couple different kings of the land of Assyria come there and attack them and basically make their boasting over that nation, right? So very important. We go on and we read some things right here. We can see thus Shalmaneser is named as the Assyrian king who invaded the land and imprisoned Hosea, right? While Sargon is the king of Assyria who captured Assyria and carried off the Israelites, right? So very important. We can see different little understanding of it. Go back up here where it's already written there, where we see in that lice, right? We can see right here, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the land and came to Samaria for 3 years and besieged it. That's the one that we're seeing with Sargon, right? First, we seen that, remember who took who, right? We see right here. We see that Hosea had entered the throne, right? And who he entered the throne after? The king who had died, which was by Tiglath-Pileser. And then we know that he was besieged by Shalmaneser, And then after Shalmaneser, it goes on and says, in the ninth year of Hosea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried off the Israelites away to Assyria and called them and basically to these different places. So you can see it's basically letting us know the same thing that we're history, right? Three different Assyrian kings talking about the same nation being taken and destroyed, just like the biblical narrative is saying, exactly to the same exact details of it, right? To the same exact details of what happened. Let's go on a little more into it. A more probable explanation is that Shalmaneser conquered Israel but died shortly after, and Sargon, writing later in his reign, took credit for the conquest. So, would Assyria do something like that? Yes, absolutely, because that lots of nations do things like that, right? The kings want to declare themselves a ruler of power, who may had not did all the conquests that he's saying that he did, but others had did it, and he's taking credit for it. For example, it said Kenneth Kitchen explains, following Shalmaneser's very brief reign, which ended before any account of his last year, could be Mon number. Probably said we'll say basically it could be Sargon II replaced him in a coup d'état. Probably said that weird, and subsequently claimed the capture of Samaria for himself much later in his reign. So it's just like what they were saying, right? We know that it was Shalmaneser. Shalmaneser is the one who conquered the city, and then Sargon came there, and he wanted to basically say that maybe he had a part in that too. Maybe he did. Maybe he did have a part in that, but he may have been stretching his truth a little bit. But we do know that just by Sargon mentioning them, that just makes the point stronger. So it says this is certainly a proper propaganda exercise to cover the gap of military successes that would otherwise disfigure the account of his reign. The mere 3 months of his ascension year were not adequate to run a campaign, nor the season suitable. The basically just talk about basically, it was a lot of stuff that was going on pretty much. So the later pretty much analysis had to cover this uh, attributing by attributing Shalmaneser's capture of Samaria to Sargon. So pretty much, this is a summary. So pretty much, we know that the setting up of Hosea. Let's go back over here. The setting up of Hosea was after the taking of Pekah by Tiglath-Pileser, and then Tiglath-Pileser had died, and then Hosea was under the reign of Shalmaneser. Shalmaneser then besieged Hosea because Hosea made an agreement with Egypt, and he got right. Then right after he made that deal with the king of Egypt, he was besieged by the king of Syria, Shalmaneser. Shalmaneser took the people, and when Sargon got there, he could have had took some people as well, but he probably didn't take Hosea. It was probably Shalmaneser who took Hosea. So, but Sargon took credit for that in his writings. He tries, and that's why you'll see Shalmaneser say, "I took the people," and then you'll see Sargon say, "I took the people," which is going to make it a double piece of credit to that the biblical narrative is true, that Hosea was taken, that the people was taken, right? That Assyria had took the people of Israel. So that's very important. So three kings verifying this one king, right? Three kings verifying this one king, right? So it's really little conclusion. So what happened to Hosea, unfortunately, is conclusively known of Hosea's death, although it seemed reasonably to conclude he perished in exile. So interesting conclusion. While the Assyrian data regarding the fall of Samaria is confusing and contrary, right? But we got the little understanding to get a full picture of that. There's inscriptions. There are inscriptions which align with the biblical account of Hosea's reign and the last days of the kingdom of Israel, right? That he was a real king who was an Assyrian vessel, but rebelled, leading to the fall of the Israelite kingdom, is historically beyond doubt. So very important. It is worth noting that the writer, right, the Book of Kings, ends the account of Israel's history with a warning, right? Recording that the fall of Samaria was God's judgment against the people's sin. And this occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods and walked in the custom of the nations, whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and in the customs that the king of Israel had practiced. So, very, very important. Stay on your God, do what's right, make a difference, stay with the Most High. So, we can see all those descriptions, right? We see, starting one more time, a little summary. All right, any questions? Just a little summary today, a little video. Shalom, family. Shalom. Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom, shalom. Amen. Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom. All right, so quick today. I just wanted to show you some interesting biblical evidence of how the gospel, the words that we have today, even the Old Testament, is historically verified and in a chain of history that cannot be broken. So you can see right here when we talk about Hosea, we have a tab of Hosea's servant. We know that he even mentions that he's a servant of Hosea. His name is Abdi. We know that he existed, and we know that that type of seal only existed in 800 BC. You know that that type of seal only enter into the style in 800 BC, and it also has Paleo Hebrew. It has Paleo Hebrew in it, so it has ancient Paleo Hebrew in it. It's a long time ago writing, and we also know that Tiglath-Pileser had wrote a letter. We have his letter in stone. That in his letter he actually that he, as it says, he actually killed the previous king of Israel, Pekah, and then he set up Hosea. So killed King Pekah, their king, and Hosea as king he appointed over them. And then what happened? And then later on, Tiglath-Pileser died, and then another king of Assyria rise, Shalmaneser the fifth. Shalmaneser reigned over Israel, but then Hosea had rebelled against him, and then he came and besieged them. It's also historically written in the Babylonian Chronicles and in the writings of Shalmaneser is that he besieged the city 3 years, which also the biblical narrative says that that's what happened, that Hosea and Israel was besieged for 3 years. And that's what's written on. So we're talking about things that are written in physical stone that we can actually see that they're crying out that the word of God is true. And then what happens, another thing that happens. So remember, Sargon takes Hosea and some of the Israelites. Then not Sargon, Shalmaneser. Shalmaneser takes the Israelites, right? Shalmaneser is going to be the one that takes the Israelites, and then comes in Sargon, right? Sargon is going to fake claim that he took the Israelites in like 15 years in his reign, and say that he took them. He probably did. He probably did. He probably didn't. But he's just confirming also that they were indeed taken. That they was indeed taken. It could be propaganda, but it is indeed verifying something that already happened before. That he's verifying that they're no longer there. But he writes it in the exact amount that he can. It could be that he's taking the final ones that's left there. Right? In fact, we know that there was still people in that land for a while, even when they took Israel, because in the book it will tell you that that land was filled up with Assyria. Instead of the Assyrians were settled there, and a couple of different Israelites were settled there as well to teach the Assyrians when he was attacked by lions. But we can see right here, indeed, Sargon also writes to the same thing, and that's also in stone, right? That's another thing that's also in stone. So we just went through one stone, right? One stone, two stones, another writing, 3 stones, and 4 stones, pretty much 4 stones, basically verifying that this king of Assyria and the nation of Israel had went into its distresses, and one part of the tribe had went into captivity into the nations. And we actually know that this is also written right in the book of truth. So with that, that's why we do this. That's why we keep the gospel going. That's why we keep the truth going, because you can't deny the truth. You can't deny the truth. So with that, family, If you feel motivated to make a cause, do anything, give anything, I got something in the description if you want to. Otherwise, with that, always at your free will, your free wager, I want to always provide deep sources of truth. May you be blessed. May you and maybe.